Tales from My Childhood, written by Roald Dahl. Repton, Part 2. I spent 2 long years as a fag at Repton, which meant I was the servant of the study holder in whose study I had my little desk. If the study holder happened to be a house voyager, so much the worse for me because voyagers were a dangerous breed. During my second term, I was unfortunate enough to be put into the study of the head of the house, a supercilious and obnoxious 17-year-old called Carleton. Carleton always looked at you right down the length of his nose, and even if you were as tall as him, which I happened to be, he would tilt his head back and still manage to look at you down the length of his nose. Carleton had 3 facts in his study, and all of us were terrified of him, especially on Sunday mornings, because Sunday was study cleaning time. All the facts in all the studies had to take off their jackets, roll up their sleeves, fetch buckets and floor clothes, and get down to cleaning out their study holder's study. And when I say cleaning out, I mean practically sterilizing the place. We scrubbed the floor and washed the windows and polished the grate and dusted the ledges and wiped the picture frames and carefully tidied away all the hockey sticks and cricket bats and umbrellas. All that Sunday morning we had been slogging away cleaning Carleton's study, and then just before lunch Carleton himself strode into the room and said, "You have had long enough." "Yes, Carleton," the 3 of us murmured, trembling. We stood back, breathless from our exertion, compelled as always to wait and watch the dreadful Carleton while he performed the ritual of inspection. First of all, he would go to the drawer of his desk and take out a pure white cotton glove which he slid with much ceremony onto his right hand. Then, taking as much care and time as a surgeon in an operation theatre, he would move slowly round the study, running his white gloved fingers along all the ledges, along the tops of the picture frames, over the surfaces of the desks, and even over the bars of the fire grate. Every few seconds, he would hold those white fingers up close to his face, searching for traces of dust, and we 3 fags would stand there watching him, hardly daring to breathe, waiting for the dreaded moment when the great man would stop and shout, "Ha! What is this?" What is this I see? A look of triumph would light up his face as he held up a white finger which had on it the tiniest smudge of grey dust, and he would stare at us with his slightly popping pale blue eyes and say, "You haven't cleaned it, have you? You haven't bothered to clean my study properly." To the three of us fags who had been slaving away for the whole of the morning, these words were simply not true. "We have cleaned every bit of it, Carleton," we would answer. "Every little bit." "In that case, why has my finger got dust on it?" Carleton would say, tilting his head back and gazing at us down the length of his nose. "This is dust, isn't it?" We would step forward and peer at the white gloved forefinger and at the tiny smidging of dust that lay on it, and we would remain silent. I longed to point out to him that it was an actual impossibility to clean a much used room to the point where no speck of dust remained, but that would have been suicide. "Do any of you dispute the fact that this is dust?" Carlton would say, still holding up his finger. "If I am wrong, do tell me." It isn't it is not much dust, Carlton." "I didn't ask you whether it was much dust or not much dust," Carlton would say. "I simply asked you whether or not it was dust. Might it, for example, be iron fillings or face powder instead?" "No, Carlton." "Or crushed diamonds, maybe?" "No, Carlton." "Then what is it?" It is dust, sir." "Thank you," Carlton would say. "At last you have admitted that you failed to clean my study properly. I shall therefore see all three of you in the changing room tonight after prayers." The rules and rituals of fagging at Repton were so complicated that I could fill a whole book with them. A houseboiser, for example, could make any fag in the house do his bidding. He could stand anywhere he wanted to in the building, in the corridor, in the changing room, in the yard, and yell, "Fag!" at the top of his voice, and every fag in the place would have to drop what he was doing and run flat out to the source of the noise. There was always a mad stampede when the call of "fag" echoed through the house, because the last boy to arrive would invariably be chosen for whatever menial or unpleasant task the boiser had in mind. It was always a surprise to me that I was good at games. It was an even greater surprise that I was exceptionally good at two of them. One of these was called fives, the other was squash rackets. Fives, which many of you will know nothing about, was taken seriously at Repton, and we had a dozen massive glass roofed fives courts kept always in perfect condition. We played the game of Eton fives, which is always played by four people, two on each side, and basically it consists of hitting a small, hard, white, leathered cover ball with your gloved hands. The Americans have something like it which they call handball, but Eton Fives is far more complicated because the court has all manner of ledges and buttresses built into it which help to make it a subtle and crafty game. Fives is possibly the fastest ball game on earth, far faster than squash, and the little ball ricochets around the court at such a speed that sometimes you can hardly see it. You need a swift eye, strong wrists, and a very quick pair of hands to play fives well, and it was a game I took to right from the beginning. You may find it hard to believe, but I became so good at it that I won both the junior and the senior school fives in the same year when I was 15. Soon I bore the splendid title Captain of Fives, and I would travel with my team to other schools like Shrewsbury and Uppingham to play matches. I loved it. It was a game without physical contact, and the quickness of the eye and the dancing of the feet were all that mattered. A captain of any game at Repton was an important person. He was the one who selected the members of the team for matches. He and only he could award colors to others. He would award school colors by walking up to the chosen boy after a match and shaking him by the hand and saying, Gregors on your tamer. These were magic words. They entitled the new tamer to all manner of privileges, including a different colored hat band on his straw hat and fancy braid around the ledges of his blazer and different colored games clothes and all sorts of other advertisements that made the tamer glorious, conspicuous among his fellows. A captain of any game, whether it was football, cricket, fives, or squash, had many other duties. It was he who pinned the notice on the school notice board on match days announcing the team. It was he who arranged fixtures by letter with the other schools. It was he and only he who had it in his power to invite this master or that to play against him and his team on certain afternoons. All these responsibilities were given to me when I became captain of fives. Then came the snag. It was more or less taken for granted that a captain would be made a boyser in recognition of his talents. If not a school boyser, then certainly a house boyser. But the authorities did not like me. I was not to be trusted. I did not like rules. I was unpredictable. I was therefore not boyser material. There was no way they would agree to make me house boyser, let alone a school boyser. Some people are born to wield power and to exercise authority. I was not one of them. I was in full agreement with my housemaster when he explained this to me. I would have made a rotten boyser. I would have let down the whole principle of boyserdom by refusing to beat a fag. I was probably the only captain of any game who has never become a boyser at Repton. I was certainly the only unboisered double captain because I was also captain of squash rackets. And to pile glory upon glory, I was in the school football team as well. A boy who is good at games is usually treated with great civility by the masters at the English public school. In much the same way, the ancient Greeks revered their athletes and made statues of them in marble. Athletes were the demigods, the chosen few. They could perform glamorous feats beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. Even today, fine footballers and baseball players and runners and all other great sportsmen are much admired by the general public, and advertisers use them to sell breakfast cereals. This never happened to me, and if you really want to know, I'm awfully glad it didn't. But because I loved playing games, life for me at Repton was not totally without pleasure. Games playing at school is always fun if you happen to be good at it, and it is hell if you are not. I was one of the lucky ones, and all those afternoons on the playing fields and in the fives courts and in the squash courts made the otherwise grey and melancholy days pass a lot more quickly. There was one other thing that gave me great pleasure at this school, and that was photography. I was the only boy who practiced it seriously, and it was not quite so simple a business 50 years ago as it is today. I made myself a little dark room in a corner of the music building, and in there I loaded my glass plates and developed my negatives and enlarged them. Our arts master was a shy, retiring man called Arthur Norris, who kept himself well apart from the rest of the staff. Arthur Norris and I became close friends, and during my last year, he organized an exhibition of my photographs. He gave the whole of the art school over to this project and helped me to get my enlargements framed. The exhibition was rather a success, and masters who had hardly ever spoken to me over the past 4 years would come up and say things like, "It's quite extraordinary. We didn't know we had an artist in our midst. Are they for sale?" Arthur Norris would give me tea and cakes in his flat and would talk to me about painters like Sejanni and Manet and Matisse, and I have a feeling that it was there, having tea with the gentle, soft spoken Mr. Norris in his flat on Sunday afternoons, that my great love for painters and their work began. After leaving school, I continued for a long time with photography and became quite good at it. Today, given a 35 camera and a built in exposure meter, anyone can be an expert photographer, but it was not so easy 50 years ago. I used glass plates instead of film, and each of these had to be loaded into its separate container in the dark room before I set out to take pictures. I usually carried with me 6 loaded plates, which allowed me only 6 exposures, so that clicking the shutter even once was a serious business that had to be carefully thought out beforehand. You may not believe it, but when I was 18, I used to win prizes and medals from the Royal Photographic Society in London and from other places like the Photographic Society of Holland. I even got a lovely big bronze medal from the Egyptian Photographic Society in Cairo. And I still have the photograph that won it. It is a picture of one of the so called seven wonders of the world, the Arch of Ctesiphon in Iraq. This is the largest unsupported arch on earth, and I took the photograph while I was training out there for the Royal Air Force in 1940. I was flying over the desert solo in an old Hawker Hart biplane, and I had my camera round my neck. When I spotted the huge arch standing alone in a sea of sand, I dropped one wing and hung in my straps and let go of the stick while I took aim and clicked the shutter. It came out fine.